It's Friday the 13th, so to celebrate, I watched all 12 Friday the 13th movies, and today I'm gonna rank them from worst to best. I'll be giving a rundown of each movie's plot and reviewing things such as characters, the kills, and just overall how enjoyable the movie is. Let's not waste any more time and head straight down to Camp Crystal Lake to rank every movie in the Friday the 13th series. Number 12, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. I remember sort of enjoying Jason Takes Manhattan a little bit when I watched it last. However, after just rewatching it for the first time in a while, I'm a bit disappointed. The 8th Friday movie tries to take Jason out of the campgrounds and bring him into the big city. But first, Jason has to board a boat hosting a graduation party to get there first. Jason has a habit of conveniently coming back to life. He's dead at the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake, and when a power cord is dragged over him, it shocks him back to life. Okay, sure. The victims for this movie are a bunch of teens on a boat, and I'm not gonna even try to list them all. We have our main girl, Rennie, who's afraid of water, a teacher named Colleen, who she's close with, then there's Sean, who's the captain's son, which is important for, well, it's not really important. Finally, to finish off our main group, we have Principal Charles, who's Rennie's uncle and guardian. He's not very fond of his niece choosing to go on the cruise. Rennie's been seeing visions of little boy Jason, and I think it's a bit weird, and it's a part of the movie that I don't really care about. Jason kills almost everybody on board the ship, using things like a guitar, a super hot stone, a shard of glass, whatever he can get his hands on. Our main group, along with Julius the boxer and Rennie's dog Toby, hop onto a lifeboat and row that thing all the way to New York. What they don't know is that Jason knows how to swim, I guess. He somehow made it to New York with them, but no way they wouldn't have noticed him holding onto their boat, right? Oh well, Jason found his way to Manhattan, so on we go. A couple of gangsters stop our group dead in their tracks and take their wallets and Rennie. Jason comes to save the day by killing the two evildoers, and Rennie escapes. In probably the most iconic scene of the movie, Jason and Julius are on top of a roof. Julius is using his boxing skills to punch the crap out of Jason.
Take your best shot, motherfucker.
Jason says, "That doesn't work for me, brother," and punches his head clean off, and it rolls into a dumpster. While driving away in a cop car, Rennie sees a vision of young Jason again and drives straight into a wall. They all get out except for Colleen, and the car goes up in flames. They just killed her off like that. Rennie blows up the car and gets probably her closest thing to a parent killed. She then freezes and remembers something that happened when she was a little girl. Her uncle Charles pushed her into Crystal Lake to try and teach her how to swim. As he watches his poor niece struggle to swim, little boy Jason is there to pull her down. Rennie nearly drowned in Crystal Lake because of her dipshit uncle. Rennie and Sean run away, and Uncle Charles gets killed by Jason. Jason drowns that bastard in a barrel of sewage. He chases Sean and Rennie all throughout Manhattan. Finally, they head down to the sewer, and they're warned about a flood of toxic waste coming soon. Rennie throws a barrel of toxic waste into Jason's face, and he removes his hockey mask to reveal his face is just straight up melting. The two teens are trying to climb out of the sewer with Jason right behind them. The flood comes and washes over Jason, and he seems to turn into a little boy again, which is weird, but apparently it was just a vision or something because Jason really just got washed away into the ocean. And that's the end of the movie. Jason Takes Manhattan just feels like a drag to me, mainly all the stuff on the boat. When we're actually in Manhattan, it picks up and we get some fun scenes, but damn, it really doesn't make it worth sitting through all that extra crap. I'm sure some Friday the 13th fans like this one, but it just wasn't for me. But in this movie's defense, it might have been because I watched all these movies nearly back to back the past couple of days, so it might have just taken a toll on me. Number 11, Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. Okay, they really tried something here. For the 7th Friday the 13th movie, they had to do something different, and oh boy did they. Jason once again comes back to life thanks to a teenage girl named Tina. How, you might ask? Well, Tina has telekinetic powers, and when she was younger, she got mad at her dad for abusing her mom and went out of control with her powers, killing her dad by dropping him into Crystal Lake. Years later, Tina goes back to Crystal Lake, being observed by a doctor. She tries to use her powers to bring her dad back, but accidentally awakens Jason and breaks the chain he was tied to. So yeah, we're doing teenager with telekinetic powers versus a super zombified Jason Voorhees. Now this movie isn't terrible, and hey, they tried something new, so props for that. I'm just not a huge fan of the plot. Of course we gotta have some teens nearby having a party. It's a case of some have a character and some are just there to have sex. They're more detailed than the first crop of basic teens we got in the first movie, but it's not too far of a step up. The main teens are good guy Nick and mean girl Melissa, who wants good guy Nick. And then of course there are some others. Good guy Nick kind of digs Tina, which makes Melissa jealous. Melissa is basically there just to throw shade at Tina and make fun of her for being a wee bit crazy. Also, we have Tina's doctor, Dr. Cruz. He's supposedly there to help Tina get over the grief of killing her father, but all he does is try to make her use her powers, and he also gets her mother killed, so, you know, he's kind of a dick. The highlights of the New Blood would probably have to be all the stunts. Jason gets a roof dropped on him, he crashes through stairs, at one point Tina hangs him with a cord, opens the floor, and drops him down into a basement. It's some pretty fun stuff. At one point, Jason uses a freaking tree saw as a weapon, and he looks super silly walking around with that thing. In the finale, we see Nick get shoved onto a boat and Tina at Jason's feet on a dock. To kill Jason, Tina freaking awakens her dead dad, and he jumps out of the lake to pull Jason down with him. What the hell, man? It's a wild movie, and it's probably one of the more unique Friday films, but I thought it was a bit much and also a bit nothing at the same time. I still had a tiny bit of fun with it, but I guess you'll have to just watch for yourself. Number 10, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. This is not a Friday the 13th movie. Now before I start, I just want to say that this movie isn't the worst thing ever. It's not even a bad movie necessarily. In Jason Goes to Hell, we see Jason get lit the F up by a firing squad and then blown to pieces. It's honestly a shocking and pretty neat way to start off the movie. Then we get into what the plot is. Jason's heart is still pumping and his soul, I guess, passes from person to person. If it wasn't a Friday movie, yeah, that concept is kind of cool. But I'm here to see Jason go to hell, man. Not Jason test driving new bodies till he can return to his old self. We also get introduced to Jason's sister. That's right, Jason has a half-sister and he needs to put his soul into her in order for him to return to his unstoppable self again. His half-sister Diana dies before he can transfer his soul. Steven is pretty much our main character, Diana's daughter's ex-husband. Jason can still become himself again if he uses a blood relative. So Diana's daughter Jessica and her and Steven's daughter Stephanie are still up for grabs. We learn all of this information from a cool guy named Creighton Duke. He's probably my favorite character in the movie, and I wish he was the main guy going around trying to stop Jason. Sadly, we don't get to see him all that much. At the end of the movie, Creighton hands Jessica a dagger, which has magical powers, I guess, since she's a Voorhees. Steven slices the neck of the current body Jason's using, and we see a little ball of ramen noodles fly around the room, and I guess Jason's soul is a living creature now. And probably my favorite part of the movie, Steven asks if it matters if the Voorhees is dead or alive. That's because Diana's body is in the house and Jason's little monster soul thing crawls into Diana's body. So Jason is finally back in his normal form. While Steven and Jason fight outside, Jessica stabs Jason in the heart with the dagger, and that spells the end for the big man. Some hands pop out of the ground and Jason gets dragged down to hell. All that's left is his hockey mask, which then gets pulled into the ground by a familiar looking set of finger knives, teasing the clash between Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. I'm not the biggest fan of the storyline, but you know what? At least it was somewhat interesting. The previous two movies on this list tried something different and did an okay job. Jason Goes to Hell switched up things big time, and I think it actually pulled something off here. Number 9, the original Friday the 13th. Now, if there's any hardcore Friday the 13th fans watching this video and this is your favorite thing because the original is super good, you know, that's fine, you can love the original. This movie is kind of not that good. It's fine, but there's nothing really to it except camp counselors getting killed off one by one. It seemed promising in the beginning, and I enjoyed getting introduced to Annie and some of the other locals, including Crazy Ralph.
It's got a death curse!
The counselors having fun and goofing off is cool and all for the first 30 minutes or so, but that's really all their characters are. I mean, they're not insufferable or anything, they just aren't as detailed or fleshed out as I would like them to be. A girl named Annie being the one we see the most at the beginning of the movie and then being one of the first to get killed off was nice. She had final girl energy, but this movie throws a little curveball there. A girl named Alice ends up becoming our real final girl. The kills in this movie are fine, a little on the basic side for some, but there are a few cool ones. Kevin Bacon's stab through the neck is iconic. Marcy gets a freaking axe to the face and there's some pretty cool effects there. The one doing all of the killing ends up being Mrs. Voorhees, who we see for the first time during the last 20 or so minutes of the movie. Her son Jason drowned in Crystal Lake years earlier because the camp counselors were too busy fucking and whatnot. So Mrs. Voorhees has been preventing Camp Crystal Lake from starting up again all these years. The reveal of her being the killer is pretty neat, although her final showdown with Alice drags out a bit. It all leads to a decapitation, which looks pretty cool, so I guess that's a nice way to end your movie. Except there's more. Little boy Jason pops out from the water and drags Alice into the lake. She wakes up in the hospital and a policeman confirms that everyone's dead. But when she asks about Jason, he says they didn't find a little boy. The final line is actually kind of chilling.
Then he's still there.
But then we get a slow zoom in on Crystal Lake with some sad music that kinda doesn't really fit what's going on, but whatever. Friday the 13th is really simple. Yeah, I have some complaints and some nitpicks, but it's not a terrible movie. Just a simple slasher that would later transform into a franchise we all know and love. Number 8, Friday the 13th Part 3. Friday the 13th Part 3 is a blend of Part 1 and Part 2, it seems. It gives more to offer than the first movie, but doesn't do as well with the characters like the second one. Part 1, they're all bland pretty much. Part 2, we get to explore them a bit more, and the same can kind of be said for Part 3. When we're first introduced to the characters, we have a basic understanding of what they're all about. Sort of. We have two stoners who are just there to be there and don't really give us anything. Well, I mean, Chili does give us her iconic scene.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Then there's another couple, Debbie and Andy, who are just there to be our horn dog couple, but at least they're enjoyable characters in my opinion. They just joke with one another and are trying to have some fun. Shelly is an annoying ass character and really doesn't change at all. Even moments where you think he'll become a better person, he just stays the same annoying ass guy. But he is the reason Jason gets his signature hockey mask, so at least he did something good in this movie. A girl named Vera is stuck being Shelly's date, and she was probably the runner-up for the final girl position before being the first of our main group to be killed, unfortunately. And there's also a biker gang that doesn't really add much other than some extra bodies. Then we have our final girl, Chris. She drives the gang up to a cabin in Higgins Haven. Chris is trying to get past the trauma of being attacked by a fucked up looking guy near Higgins Haven 2 years earlier. Wonder who that could have been. Chris has a boyfriend named Rick who hasn't seen her in a while and wants his needs to be fulfilled. I don't really care about Rick. He's another character who I just don't really like, and he contributes pretty much nothing to the movie whatsoever. I'm not the biggest fan of Chris either. She seems nice, but just sort of runs around with Rick while her friends get killed. The only reason she's the final girl is because she was previously attacked by Jason. Speaking of Jason, he's been hiding out at a barn next to where they're staying. Other than the main cabin, that's where a decent chunk of this movie takes place. In the end, we see Chris bonk Jason over the head with a shovel and then hangs him. Somehow he survives and removes his mask for a bit to get the rope off from around his neck. He reveals his ugly, deformed face, and Chris recognizes him as the person who attacked her 2 years earlier. Jason tries to kill Chris, but one of the bikers from earlier is still alive and distracts him. He and his other biker friends were attacked and killed earlier. Jason quickly deals with Biker Boy, but Chris picks up an axe and drives it into Jason's head. Chris, just like Alice, hops in a canoe and floats across the water. However, she sees Jason inside the cabin and he's quickly making his way towards her. It seems like she was just seeing things though, because when she glances back at the cabin, there's no Jason in sight. But it's not over yet for Chris, as the rotted corpse of Mrs. Voorhees jumps out of the water and pulls Chris down with her. That also wasn't real. Just a little nightmare. Police escort Chris away from the cabin and we see Jason still lying in the barn. Okay, on to the kills. We have the handstand kill, that's pretty silly and fun. Jason shoots a harpoon right into Vera's eye, acting like James Bond. Also, there's Rick's head squeeze with that ridiculous looking fake head. The kills feel a bit more silly now that I'm saying all of this out loud, but I think it kind of works. I think Friday Part 3 suffered from having a weak main character. Chris should have been able to do more instead of just walking in the woods with Rick. Number 7, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. Friday the 13th, A New Beginning is the 5th film in the franchise and takes place 5 years after Part 4. We're sticking with Tommy Jarvis, who's still dealing with the trauma of the Jason killing spree that took place all those years ago. Tommy ends up being transferred to a place for troubled teens with the goal of having him rejoin society and start a new life. The little halfway house just so happens to be in the middle of the woods. Some murders start taking place and Tommy is seeing visions of Jason, who he killed in Part 4. So maybe that hockey mask wearing son of a gun isn't dead after all. A New Beginning is on par with Part 3 in my opinion. I think both movies have the same amount of positives and negatives, but A New Beginning somewhat does a better job with the themes it's going for. Tommy's trauma plot works way better than Chris's sort of half-assed trauma story. It does help that Tommy's incident happened in the previous movie, so we actually got to see everything go down, but I still think the movie does a better job of exploring the whole trauma thing, rather than just having Tommy say, "I was attacked," and then just moving on with his day. Now the characters are a bit lackluster, especially the troubled teens. The extra characters are fun and we get to spend at least a little time with them. The characters in this movie have more of a goofy side. I think this is where the Friday franchise starts to get a little bit sillier, but I'm fine with that. Some of my favorites are Reggie, his older brother Demon, and Ethel. Ethel, along with her son Junior, are a couple of nutcases, but I just can't help but smile every time Ethel's on screen.
Don't you come near me, Sheriff, I warn you.
I got a bomb on me. I swear to you.
For the most part, I enjoy this movie. It's the reveal of who's been doing all the killing that's sort of a buzzkill. Throughout the movie, pretty much all of our characters get killed, obviously. We have flares and mouths, axes going where they probably don't belong, and some pretty vicious eye stuff. But we never see who's doing all of it. In the end, we end up with just Reggie and a woman named Pam who was supervising the teens. Tommy kind of dipped right before all the bodies were found, so it kind of makes you think that maybe Tommy went crazy and started killing everyone. He has been a bit aggressive since arriving at the halfway house. Reggie and Pam finally come face to face with the killer. He's wearing the typical Jason outfit, so maybe he is back from the dead after all. Pam and Reggie get separated, and when it appears that Pam is about to be the killer's next victim, Reggie crashes through the wall of the barn driving a tractor and smashes into the hockey-masked killer. Reggie the Reckless saves the day, that is, until the killer gets back up. He slowly chases them inside the barn, and wouldn't you know it, Tommy shows up. So if Tommy's not the killer, then who the hell is it? Tommy gets a machete slice to the chest, which takes him out for a bit. The killer makes his way to the second floor of the barn and is nearly kicked off the barn onto the ground by Reggie. The killer, however, still won't stay down. Tommy eventually gets back up and chops off the killer's hand, sending him flying off the barn and onto some spikes down below. The killer's mask pops off and it's revealed to be none other than Roy Burns. Oh, wait, you don't know who Roy Burns is?
You talking to me, Sheriff?
Well, at the start of the movie, back at the house for troubled teens, some kid named Joey pissed off a dude with some major anger issues. That dude axed Joey right in the back numerous times and killed that poor bastard. One of the paramedics who arrived on the scene just so happened to be Roy Burns himself. Joey was his son. So Roy used the story of Jason to cover up that it was him doing all of the killing and getting revenge. We end the movie with several teases of Tommy becoming the next Jason. I get the motive for Roy doing all the killing, but I just don't care, man. These movies are all about Jason and his mother, kind of, so seeing some random dude try to copy Jason's style is just not for me. You can still have some fun with A New Beginning, and I think the positives outweigh the negatives. Number 6, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter is the fourth film in the Friday series. Jason breaks out of the morgue and is headed back out to kill some people. I'm very torn by this movie. I think it's good, but I wasn't too impressed or anything like that. This time, instead of our usual group of teens staying and partying at a place they shouldn't, we have teens still partying, but they've moved next door to the lovely Jarvis family. So here's where I'm torn. The Jarvis family is great. Mama Jarvis, Trish, and her little brother Tommy, along with their dog Gordon. They're a nice and wholesome family that I have no problem with whatsoever. Then we have the teens that moved in next door. I don't even care to list off their names because they're just there to die. They have some personality, aka they all just want to have sex, but I have no real reason to care about them. Then there's a guy named Rob who's just kind of out in the woods. The reason he's out camping in the woods is because Jason killed his sister Sandra, who was in part 2. That's something, I guess. We have a character that has some sort of interesting purpose for being there. Maybe I'm too harsh on the teens, cause in their defense, it's a Friday the 13th movie. They're just doing what all the other teens did. I guess I just found some of them to be either really bland or just really annoying. Like Ted, for example. He annoyed the shit out of me. Then we have Samantha and Paul, who pretty much do nothing. When it becomes night, Jason starts his killing spree. He starts with a skinny dipping Samantha. He hits her with a signature Jason stab to the torso. Later, a girl named Terry is ready to leave the gang's little party, but her sister Tina is too busy getting it on with dead fuck Jimmy, who actually we later learn is not a dead fuck, and he's actually incredible at the sex. I know you don't care, but that's really Jimmy's whole character. Darn, am I really a dead fuck? Oh yay, this girl says I'm not. He later goes downstairs to celebrate his sex, but Jason stabs him in the hand with a corkscrew and then shoves a cleaver right in his head. In probably my favorite kill in the movie, Jason smashes through an upstairs window and just yoinks Tina and she goes flying off the second story onto a car in slow motion. It's pretty freaking cool. Let's go to the Jarvis storyline now. Sadly, we lost Mama Jarvis after the power went out, so Trish and Tommy return to an empty home. Trish is out looking for her mom and she stumbles upon Rob's tent. Rob meets up with her and that's when she learns that Jason is still alive and has escaped from the morgue. They go to check on the teens next door and find the bodies of the poor fuckers. Rob gets attacked by Jason in the basement and confirms that Jason is in fact killing him. Trish now has Rob's machete and runs back to her house to be with Tommy. Jason terrorizes them and chases them around the house. Trish is able to make Jason follow her back to the house next door, and Tommy gets the idea to try and pull a Jenny from part 2 and trick Jason. He shaves his head bald in a way to where he kind of looks like little gross boy Jason. Trish and Jason return to the Jarvis house and Tommy's plan actually works. Tommy grabs a hold of the machete and chops Jason right in the head, and when he falls down to the floor, he starts sliding down on the machete. Once again, Pretty freaking cool. Tommy notices Jason's fingers twitching and starts going crazy on him. Trish, meanwhile, is freaking out due to Tommy's extreme craziness. Later, we see Trish in a hospital bed asking for her brother. Little bald Tommy runs in and they hug. Tommy Jarvis gives us some creepy eyes to end the movie. Now, really, the only thing holding this movie back for me is the teens not having more of a character. Other than that, there are some pretty cool moments in the final chapter, so I do think there are some redeeming qualities. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about it, though. Number 5. Freddy vs. Jason. Freddy vs. Jason as a movie is very middle of the road. The characters are okay, you know, not great or anything. Some of the writing/dialogue is a bit weird and kind of stupid.
Wait a minute. Freddy died by fire, Jason by water. How can we use that?
This movie is pretty much just carried by the fact that we get to see Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees interacting with one another, especially the last 20 minutes where they beat the holy hell out of each other at Camp Crystal Lake. Freddy has been forgotten about, so he uses Jason to scare people into remembering him. Jason's a killing machine though, so he's not gonna stop killing people whenever Freddy is back to full power. Krueger decides to turn heel on Jason and bring him into Dream World and try to end him for good. Our main group of characters realize that Jason is sort of the good guy in this situation, so they help him out by bringing Freddy into the real world. This movie had the chance to be better, but I think it just missed its mark. Freddy using Jason is cool, and the two fighting back and forth at the end of the movie is really cool. It's just that everything in the middle with our Springfield teens is just not on the same level. Regardless, I just can't help but get excited when Freddy and Jason are beating the absolute crap out of one another. Freddy using Jason's mom to talk shit to him and then bullying the poor guy in the dream world is just top tier Freddy Krueger assholery. Number 4. Friday the 13th Part 2. Much more enjoyable compared to the first Friday the 13th. I think Part 2 is a major step up in every category, but I mean, to be fair, they had more story already set up. Part 2 takes place 5 years after the first movie, and once again, another summer camp is trying to open up. The group of soon-to-be dead counselors are led by Paul and his assistant Ginny. The group get told about what happened 5 years ago in the form of a campfire story. We don't really go super in-depth or anything with our main group of counselors, but for the most part, they're pretty likable, and that's enough for me. Now moving on to the kills. We still have a few off-screen kills and a couple of lackluster deaths, but we still get some pretty good ones. Mark getting a face full of machete before rolling down the stairs backwards in his wheelchair is a bit messed up, but also a little funny. I really liked Mark. Sad to see him go. Then we have the infamous 2-for-1 special where Jeff and Sandra get stabbed by a spear. Also, we lose 2 characters from the first movie. Crazy Ralph is hanging around camp but gets some barbed wire around his neck. Then our final girl Alice gets a greeting from Mrs. Voorhees' severed head in her fridge before the one and only Jason Voorhees sneaks up from behind and stabs Alice in the head. It's now Jason's time to shine. Our new final girl is Ginny. And, you know, Paul's there too, I guess. They were at a bar with some of the other counselors, enjoying their last chance to hang out in town for a little while. Good thing they did, otherwise they'd end up just like the others. Jason welcomes them back to Camp Crystal Lake by attacking Paul and knocking him out for a bit. In the end, Ginny ends up being chased to Jason's little shelter in the woods. She sees a shrine Jason made for his mother and decides to put her child psychology skills to good use. She puts on Mrs. Voorhees' sweater and tries to trick Jason into thinking she's his mother. He falls for the trick until he sees that his mother's head is still just chilling there on the shrine. He gains the upper hand on Ginny before Paul shows up from out of nowhere and brawls with Jason. Ginny picks up the machete that he dropped and stabs Jason with it. Paul and Ginny head back to one of their cabins and are greeted by Muffin the dog. Such a good Muffin. Before you know it, Jason's back and bursts through the window to end the movie. Friday the 13th Part 2 is a solid movie and I really don't have any complaints. For a bit, I wasn't a fan of the whole pretending to be Mrs. Voorhees ending, but after hearing Ginny's thoughts about Jason's relationship with his mother and learning that she's been studying child psychology, the ending makes much more sense to me. You could watch the second Friday the 13th without ever fully watching the first one, and I think you wouldn't really miss anything. I mean, they recapped the last 20 minutes of the first movie at the beginning, so, you know, that helps. Number 3, Jason X. Jason X is a really silly movie. Jason, along with a scientist named Rowan, are frozen and found by some students on a field trip in the year 2455. Both of them get unfrozen on a spaceship and Rowan tries to warn Professor Lowe about how dangerous Jason is, but it's too late. Jason is about to go on a killing spree in space. Jason X is not a perfect movie. It's cheesy and a little dumb sometimes, but it's a fun ride from beginning to end. It has lots of cool moments and I honestly think I could watch it over and over again. Also, Jason X has probably one of the most famous Friday the 13th kills. That liquid nitrogen kill is insane. It also helps that the main crew members we follow along are pretty chill. Sometimes they have a cringy line or two, but I don't really mind.
Oh, wow. Gave her an upload.
afraid I'm gonna have to hurt you now.
An android that goes by KM is also a part of the team, and she's one of my favorites. Then we have Sergeant Bronsky, who's an absolute badass. That man is not afraid of Jason one bit. Jason himself gets a bit of an upgrade in this movie. After a super upgraded KM shoots the shit out of Jason, the ship's nanotech starts rebuilding him. Say hello to Uber Jason. It's a fight for survival as the remaining crew tries to reach a rescue ship. There's even a funny bit towards the end of the movie where they try and distract Jason by making a simulation of Crystal Lake. Like I said, it's really silly, but I just love this movie so much. Number 2, Friday the 13th, 2009. The 2009 Friday the 13th reboot is, in my opinion, very, very well done. It's Jason Voorhees at his scariest and smartest. He sets up traps, moves quickly, and has amazing aim. I think this might just be my favorite version of him. Sorry, Uber Jason. In the cold open, we sort of get a mini Friday the 13th movie, filled with backstory and campers getting killed. Our main group of characters we follow are a group of friends going to spend the weekend in a sick-ass house near Crystal Lake. And then we have Clay, who's trying to find his missing sister who was a part of that cold open. I think this cast of characters is alright. Clay is cool, and the whole looking for his missing sister plot is actually pretty neat. The group of friends, for the most part, follow the typical just wanna party teens from the other Friday movies. Some of them are there just for fun and don't do a whole lot. For example, Chewie and Lawrence. But I enjoy them as just the stoner party guys. Plus, Lawrence gets to mention the greatest band of all time.
Look, don't put me in a box, alright? What? Because I'm black, I can't listen to Green Day?
Next up, we have Dickhead Trent, the guy with the sweet-ass house, and his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend Jenna. She has Final Girl written all over her. The Friday the 13th reboot is a nice blend of the first several movies. It doesn't ever reach the over-the-top stuff like New Blood and Jason Goes to Hell. It's simple, but succeeds at everything it tries to do. Next to Freddy vs. Jason, this is probably the entry on this list I've seen the most. The reason it's the runner-up, though, is because I enjoyed the number 1 spot just a little bit more. They're pretty much tied because both are amazing movies in the Friday the 13th series. And at number 1, we have Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Jason Lives is an all-around great Friday the 13th movie. We got cool and fun characters, we got Jason coming back from the dead for the first official time, we have some silly moments but nothing that goes overboard. I really enjoyed this movie. Tommy Jarvis is back once again and he is here to make sure Jason is dead. He's been seeing visions of him ever since Part 5, so he wants to make sure Jason has no chance of coming back. He finds Jason's grave and sure enough, Jason is there looking all nasty. He stabs the body with an iron rod and then lightning strikes. Jason gets a little bit of a kickstart, no Mountain Dew necessary. Jason is officially back and kicks off his killing spree by punching right through one of Tommy's friends. Zombie Jason has always been one of my favorite versions of him. He's no longer just a confused boy who's been living in the woods all his life. He's an unstoppable killing machine. We also have the counselors returning in Part 6. Part 3 had friends hanging out, Part 4 had some teens renting a house to party, and Part 5 had the home for troubled teens. This time the counselors take a bit of a back seat, but are still a factor. We even get to see kids for the first time. Usually they're gearing up for summer camp, but this time the kids are here and are ready to have some fun. Thanks to them, we get to hear the iconic dead meat line.
What do you think?
I think we're dead meat. Real dead meat.
There's really only one important character in the group of counselors, but we'll get to her in a bit. A few of the counselors are typical Friday the 13th meatbags, but they're still enjoyable to watch. Sissy and Paula are two that stand out to me because they seem like genuinely good people. They both comfort one of the kids after what they assume was a bad dream. Now on to our main plot. Tommy is trying to warn the sheriff that Jason is back. Sheriff Garris doesn't want to hear any of that nonsense and thinks Tommy is just being crazy. He recognizes Tommy and wants to send him back to the mental institute. One of the counselors just so happens to be the sheriff's daughter, Megan. She quickly takes an interest in Tommy. The sheriff tries to force Tommy to leave town, but Tommy is not having any of it. Jason goes on his killing spree, which includes him crashing an RV, which is pretty badass. Sheriff Garris assumes Tommy is the one responsible, trying to force the whole Jason is still alive story. Megan and Tommy meet up and Megan wants to help, though it isn't long before Tommy is caught yet again. Jason kills the last two remaining counselors at camp, Sissy and Paula. Sissy gets launched out of her slippers and gets her head twisted off. Holy shit. In the end, everyone is at Camp Crystal Lake. Tommy, Megan, Sheriff Garris, and of course, Jason Voorhees. The sheriff manages to put up a fight against Jason, but ends up being folded like a piece of paper. Tommy has a plan to finally stop Jason. He chains Jason to a boulder and forces him to sink down to the bottom of Crystal Lake. Jason attempts to drown Tommy by bringing him down with him, but Megan uses the boat propeller to cut into Jason's face. Tommy and Megan make it back to land and all the kids cheer, and they lived happily ever after. The end. This movie is fun. I like Megan's willingness to help out Tommy and going against her dad. Sheriff Garris has a valid reason to be against Tommy, and I just really enjoy him as a character. The majority of the counselors, like I said, don't really have much going for them, but their screen time is limited, so they don't feel like they're taking up too much space. Pretty much just everything we know and love about Jason, mixed with some fun moments and good characters. And there you have it. Those are all 12 of the Friday the 13th movies ranked from worst to best, in my opinion. Remember, it is just my opinion. Rank them down in the comments below. You can hate this list. I'm sure some of you probably do. Tell me why you hate the list. Tell me why Jason Takes Manhattan is actually a masterpiece. I don't know. Maybe you have a point, and maybe I'll change my mind. That's another thing. My opinion can easily change when it comes to rankings and stuff like that, so ask me in a month, and a few of the movies will probably be swapped, so, in the end, it doesn't really matter. If you like ranking content, then make sure to come back next Friday, as I'll be looking at every Blink-182 album. They have a new album dropping that Friday, so what a better way to celebrate than doing more ranking videos. Yippee! Hope you enjoyed. That's all for me. Bye-bye.